Cloud Native Afterdark. It's all beards, but one.
I would trade my beard for a pink hair, to be
Beards
honest.
and pink hair.
Why not both?
The Cloud Native
Oh,
way.
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, Casey has accomplished this from time to time.
Occasional.
So we got Berlin, we got Los Angeles. Are you in Atlanta, John?
Yeah, Ackworth, which is South Tennessee, but
And I don't know where Victor lives, but
I'm in Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara, just up the road.
Yeah, not too bad.
We're in sunny Berlin, where it is actually after dark.
It's dark coffee, I believe, is what you said was going to be happening today.
Yeah.
The dark has gone.
after
Here
dark.
we are again. All right, so what should we talk about today? There's the summit, so that's topic.
Mm-hmm.
There's containers, orchestration.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to talk about? What do you do, Vic?
Well, I'm actually just transitioning out of Eucalyptus, so I ran the quality department for Yucca for the last 5 years, and kind of dealing with, how do you actually make an infrastructure as a service product that can be delivered to customers, which I think we can all appreciate is not an easy job.
Not an easy job.
No, it's tough. And so now I'm transitioning to Google, where I'll be a cloud solutions architect. So I'm pretty excited about that move from, the private cloud infrastructure business is a very tough place to be, where you have to deal with all of the legacy problems and enable all of the new hotness that's coming out. And you're kind of betwixt in that tough place where you really do have to deal with ARP and Layer 2 and all the fun stuff that comes with real infrastructure, but be able to give your customers all of the hotness that comes with cloud and the ease of use and all of that stuff and the self-service. And that's been the place that I've been, and now I'm transitioning to Google, where I get to live in that public cloud world where a little bit of that goes away.
Plus you get to depend on them choosing the random hardware and operating it.
Exactly.
What could possibly go wrong? Sorry, John.
You're saying that the networking and the private cloud is not a solved problem?
It's totally solved. It's called SDN, like you just software define it, and then you never worry about ARP.
There you go.
Are you having some hate on those ARP cache timeouts, because those are totally a thing?
God, yeah. So when I left, I told them, the thing that I want to do is never think about ARP again. That's really, if I could honestly never think about ARP again, I'd be very, very happy. My last job before this was at a Layer 2, service access network company, and my entire life was ARP. And the amount of bugs that we realized that we had due to ARP cache timeouts and things like that with Yucca was so non-trivial that I can't do it anymore.
This is definitely the highest ARP to After Dark ratio that we've ever had.
Wait, who has Santa Barbara? Just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Are you in Santa Barbara?
Yeah, luckily.
So, but this actually makes a really good point, that when we're thinking about cloud, we don't ourselves have to deal with our cache timeouts. I mean, somebody does. It's being abstracted away to some layer. Willis, you've got more networking stuff in Docker 1.9 I saw in the release candidate. Does that mean that networking is totally solved from your point of view?
No, of course not. Not even close, right? It's better. I mean, the 1.9 release candidate 3 stuff, it's finally literally back where, since you asked me a question, I'm giving you a little history lesson. I mean, when we started socket playing, the idea was that containers were never going to scale, particularly Docker. Well, we tripled down on Docker, and we believed that they were never going to scale with what anybody was thinking. Certainly not the out-of-the-box Linux bridge. Some of the way people were attacking the overlay. So we went right for the guts of using Open vSwitch as kind of our data plane. Programmability, we built that. We were actually pretty far along, even though we were only about 3 or 4 months old. And then one of the things that happened when we got acquired by Docker was to really try to scale that model out horizontally in a plugin architecture such that, so instead of us just moving, we were a David and Goliath, right? We wanted to go right against NSX and ACI and all those guys and just say, if you're going to use Docker, like, we're the scalable solution right now. And proven by Open vSwitch. And then when we came on board, it was more of a, how do we, because Docker is pretty viral, how do you build that architecture so that it fits for NSX, for this ACI? So that's what the guys did, and then in 1.7 or 1.8, it was experimental, which was the first cut at, it was actually not supposedly designed as an MVP, but it turned out to be an MVP because the first cut of how they decided to do the networking was confusing. I don't know if any of you got to play with libnetwork a little bit, but the service and the network, combined and all that. So I think there was a little bit of retrofitting, and now in 1.9 we're in a base place where you actually can use a form of VXLAN over Linux. Still not my preferred way of doing things, but Brent Salisbury, who too bad he's probably awake right now because he's always working. But he's built a whole bunch of really nice reference plugins now. For IPVLAN, we got the Open vSwitch one, and so it's not a solved problem, but it's.
I think Craig heard about ARP caching and couldn't help himself. Had to join.
Yeah, but we're in a good starting place, and as you know, Bridget, you've got more field time with Docker than I do, and I think that we're in a good. What will really get interesting, and I'll stop the Docker talk here in a second, but what will be really interesting is if the big players, like if when we really see robust supported plugins from Cisco and VMware, and they use our libnetwork architecture, then I think that's when the game really begins.
No, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on and giving us more insight into this too. Since, obviously from the socket plane days on, like, you've spent a lot of time with this. And also, remember, this is Cloud Native Afterdark, not Cloud Foundry Afterdark. Like, we don't have to only talk about Cloud Foundry.
No, I knew that.
We really talk about Docker.
Yeah. No, cool. And I know Docker's a part of your infrastructure as well.
Absolutely.
Do you guys think that, honestly, any developer wants to think about networking?
Hell no.
No, but neither do operators.
It's the anti-pattern, I think, to think about networking at all. Like, I've been through the whole stack, from layer 2, and wanted to eliminate any layer I could out of my working day because I felt like it could have been abstracted by something, right? It didn't matter what it was. Like, I just wanted it to be gone from my day-to-day. So I think our job as, people who are driving infrastructures to make those developers just network agnostic. And service discovery for me has been kind of that eye-opening experience where I just know it's going to be there, and I know that may be like, hey, that's not going to always be there for you in whatever, orchestration framework you have, but that's been where I want to be as the mecca of kind of infrastructure deployment is I know where things are going to be. There are services that I can depend on, kind of a thing.
So libnetwork. So just because again, I don't know if we'll get the adoption and uptick, but Madhu Vengapali, he was my primary engineer at Socket Plane. He spent 10 years writing ASICs programs on the Cat 6K, and then was the first committer on Open Daylight. Went over to Red Hat. Has a lot of experience. So one of the things he did with libnetwork was, first off, rip all the networking code out of all the different places it was in Docker, right? So it was some was in Docker Engine, some was in libcontainer. So the idea to create a standalone project called libnetwork, rewritten in Go, and that supported plugin. And his vision is exactly what you said. And if you look at, and again, whether this turns out, a project and a project creator's vision and how it actually ends up in the real world from adoption, we never know. But like he stated at DockerCon in June that the vision was to do for networking what Docker did for compute, right? And so to be able to create, just two abstractions, a service abstraction and a network abstraction. And the developer then should have been able to just say, here's my service, here's my network in that service.
Too much. No.
But that sounds like he's talking about Kubernetes right there, right? Like the literal abstractions that Kubernetes has is the replication controller and the service.
But you just said developers don't want to have to specify things about networks.
But they didn't. They just said service. Right? My service is this. My actual program is this other thing, and that's how we map.
Well, it's a set of primitives.
It depends what it's primitives, yeah. And again, they spend a lot of time worrying about the naming of a service and a network, and because it's hard, right? Because we also support Windows now too, right? So, and they have a whole complete different name of things. But whatever you end call the abstraction, the idea was for the developer to say, I'm going to build this service, and I want this part of the service to be in this abstraction.
I think this is my personal opinion that there's a bifurcation, and when we say developer in that sense, then I don't think that same developer that's going to set up these abstractions with the networks is the same one who's going to work on the business logic of an app.
But so let me.
There's it's just a port. You're talking about a port.
I'm not saying they can't be the same person, but it doesn't. It's not going to work that well at scale. It's not going to work that well in most organizations that I work with right now. There's a specialized knowledge on both sides of that it's kind of a waste of time for both of them to know all that.
What is the specialized knowledge on the side of the person who's dealing with what ports need to bind to which containers, for example?
Absolutely waste of time. Going back to what you said before, give them an abstraction to do service discovery. Right. You say you register your service, and then like magic happens. And
but you do want network isolation, right? Like so.
That's not their problem.
That's not their problem. You make the policy. The policy is enforced by the platform.
I mean, again, I'll just tell you one more time what Madhu's vision was. Madhu's vision was to be able to make that so simple, and even to the point where it's YAML, composable YAML, so I can say, here is my service definition, here's how I want to isolate the web tier, here's how I want to isolate the database tier, and then on the back end, it was a completely decoupled, this is live network, completely decoupled architecture for a plugin where it's just a contract arrangement where it's like these are the things that you have to supply, and then the plugin. So in that world, the development again, I'm not just like everything else. There's a lot of ways to solve a problem, a lot of opinions. I'm just saying that the lib network opinion was that if I can allow somebody through some type of composition definition to say, here's my service, here's my abstraction of a network, and here are the components of this network, then behind the service would be the choice of the customer service discovery engine, and behind the network would be a fully functional, it could be NSX from VMware, it could be ACI.
So I love the idea of these primitives existing.
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
But I don't necessarily want every developer exposed to even think about that.
I necessarily don't want them to be exposed to that.
Exactly.
I want them to know nothing about networks. I want them to know about ports. I want them to know about maybe a file system, and that's it.
But in this model, you don't even know about ports. I mean, literally, that's the beauty, because that becomes the policy definitions.
But that's who is making those. The question is,
that's where
does the developer commit to the repository to make that service go live, and/or to staging, and/or to wherever? That's the question that we need to ask, right?
Well, I mean, so in this
that's the person who's driving business value.
So in this model, actually, the model is that if the service is the same and the network changes, imagine a CI loop where you could start on your desktop where the network is basically a local network. Service is exactly the same. Then you move it into CI, and now the network is a completely different set of network. And the only thing that gets toggled is the network name all the way through the pipeline until the final. So in other words, the network could be completely different plugin at any stage, and the final one could be your robust, SDN.
But as a developer, all I did was commit code and push it through a set of pipelines. I don't need to know what network plugins were behind that.
You're missing my point. You don't. All they have to do is say the network name. All they have to do is say network name. It's just it's a blue, a green, orange web. It's just an abstraction.
I'm going to call mine John M. Willis. That's my new network.
But the point is, nothing behind that abstraction, at least in this model, requires you to know anything about the plugin, anything about the architecture, and even better, it gets you out of in Docker world, linking and port mapping, because that's driven by the policy of the implementation of the plugins, the policy that describes the data plane manipulation of the plugin, and the developer is completely out of it, but we get to abide by their thinking pattern of how they want the composition of the application.
Can we stop the whole linking pattern by just saying that DNS discovery is the right way to do things?
Something that looks suspiciously like DNS, maybe not DNS.
Yeah, fair enough, right? Like, you have a name that you know will map to the right service given your environment. I think that's
all in favor. Say aye.
Then we take Amazon Web Services out of the picture because that's not how they do it.
Right.
Well, but you can build
that's
a platform. An alternative platform on Amazon that does that. And
I can make that happen in Amazon with Kubernetes or.
No, I mean you can make it happen, but today the way you do it is with security groups, and it's exactly what the libnetwork model is driving towards. It's a complete separation.
But the problem with security groups, though, is that works super as long as everything is in Amazon, maybe inside the same VPC.
No. Well, and again,
as soon as you move outside of that, you have problems.
I agree. Imagine if something like libnetwork was that solution.
Right.
That's my only point. Imagine if there was a generic, written, open source.
Where does libnetwork? Libnetwork is gonna run in some VMs somewhere, right? Like, let's be clear about that part. So, what do you do about that layer and then the other libnetwork layer?
I didn't really understand the question.
So you're going to have VMs somewhere that are running in a security group, right? Or a network layer of some sort that is blocking traffic from the outside.
Or some IP tables rules somewhere.
Yeah, IP table, yeah. If you're running in a data center. So then libnetwork can do what?
Well, again, it depends on the implementation. It depends on the plugin. So libnetwork does not get involved with any of that. It basically allows the plugin to do IPAM, service discovery, and however they want to handle the data plane routing and programmability of the data plane. Like guys like Calico are all BGP based, right? NSX would basically use their policy abstraction to update the data plane, and and would not even have IP tables because in some of those SDN implementations, that stuff is done at the data plane through the policy. Again, it's a proposal of a model. Do I think the world is going to pick up libnetwork and say let's throw everything away? Probably not. The only people that are probably going to use it are the people that are using Docker. Although I know that the Kubernetes team is
my legit problem is that I hate networking because I understand it, and that it's networking sucks. Networking sucks. It's the worst thing ever, and I want to never think about it again.
Well, then /64.
I want a platform that gives me something that I don't actually have to think about networking.
Right, the guys who use plugins that do /64 to the host, bang, that's it. IPv6 /64 to host, plugin that supports that.
Right. I think that's
so
really
on that note, maybe we can find a new topic.
All right, fair enough.
So I see.
Networking sucks. Let's end that topic.
Yeah.
Let's talk about storage.
No. Now it's time for me to go to bed.
Did Tammy just say something? Hey, Dip Tammy, you joined. I want you to say something. Say something. Oh.
Hey guys. I was just listening to this conversation. It's very interesting. been working in the space for some time, so it's interesting to hear like what others have to say. Definitely, networking is a hard problem. Um, yeah.
And those,
Networking and storage. That's your two hard problems.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, storage is hard, and every time I hear about cluster schedulers and people talking about cluster schedulers, is that people talk about how how no one is really solving the storage problem, no one is solving the persistent volume problem,
Yep.
but I see that people are not even solving the use case, the 80% use cases, which is like easier to solve, and then tackle the persistence problem.
Right. I
Um,
like that. That's true.
so so I think we need to solve storage, but I think we are a little far away from there. And also like I think the more we are doing distributed systems, the more distributed systems are becoming commodity. Like we are going to see more systems which are doing replication and things like that at the application level, and not so much at the storage or the infrastructure level. So I think most of the people who would need like persistence volume and storage kind of primitives are the people who are still running applications which are more traditional or which are not distributed, which are not sort of like using things like failover and replication and things like that. So I think the more we move towards modern distributed systems, the need for replicated volumes and things like that are going to decrease, and we are going to see that people using more and more ephemeral volumes and replicating things at the higher level.
I
So
I would hope, Diptanu, I love that theory that everybody can get away from these block stores and all that stuff. But what has to happen is that we get towards this object storage model.
Yeah, I was going to make this point where I think that you're sort of right in the sense that it doesn't make sense to attach volumes all over the place to all these containers.
Yep.
But as you progress, at some point you want to get to something that probably looks suspiciously like Lambda,
Yep.
where you've got this fabric of storage and you can move compute to the right place where you have locality to do the
And act
processing.
off of the fact that something has changed in that storage, right? Like that is important to be able to react to storage now, right? Before.
It's basically Lambda is basically stored procedures on a
Yeah.
database.
Yep.
That's what we get to.
Yep.
I want to ask Diptanu, I think you just switched gigs. Can you tell us about what you're doing, what you were doing, and what you're doing now to kind of attack these interesting problems?
yeah, so I used to work at Netflix, and I was working on I built a meso scheduler at Netflix called Titan, and Titan was like a typical Amazon Web Service.
Oh,
Uh,
shape.
we I wanted to write a meso scheduler which is pretty much like cloud native, which doesn't have assumptions that it is ever going to be running on a data center. So we could let go of things like rack affinity and things like that, because on the cloud, things like optimizing a framework for doing rack affinity didn't make a lot of sense. So the scheduling algorithm was going to be different and things like that. So I did that at Netflix, and now I'm at HashiCorp. I work on a cluster scheduler called Nomad, and yeah, so been pretty much working on Nomad, and we are trying to do like a new release, which is sort of going to bring in things like like Nomad is pretty new. Like it's still we're still going through the phase of making it more and more production ready and scalable and things like that. So working on Nomad scheduling system, and working on the drivers, the various drivers of Nomad. So Nomad supports like containers and like Zen and KVM VM workloads. So that's pretty much like what I've been doing. And the storage stuff that we just talked about is interesting because a lot of people keep asking us like, what is our plan for doing storage? And doing storage properly is not like something that can be done in a couple of weeks. So it's like a lot of challenges there. Like what happens when a container dies, and how do we replicate the volume, and how fast can we replicate the volume? Like if an application dies, like it's just not about like getting the volume detached and like moving the volume around. It's like how reliably and how quickly can we do it? So there are things like that. And I think we talked about like object storage and things like that. At the end of the day, object storage is also a service, right? Like it's the software service which is replicating the data around. So I think it will be nice like if we can write cluster schedulers which can support running software like an object store, right? Like I haven't seen too many people even run Cassandra on a Meso system or like any cluster scheduler out there today. So if we can write a cluster scheduler and can make our cluster schedulers good enough for running things like Cassandra or HBase, I think like I would say like we would have done like a good job,
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty exciting. And we should, when we're talking about cluster scheduling, I should mention that I got an opportunity at OSCON to go to Kelsey Hightower's Kubernetes workshop. And it was interesting when he was talking about it as like a framework that he doesn't see as an entire platform. He just sees it as this is something possibly pluggable that, people can use as a building block to solve some of these problems. I think we're starting to get a lot of interesting pieces that you can use to do stuff like that.
Absolutely. Going back, just to add one note to the stores discussion, you can do something in 3 weeks. It just isn't going to be very good, and you can't keep good promises about it. So I think what people are going through right now, it's a question of, what actually do you want to do that makes sense that you can protect people's data. Like you don't want to lose people's data. That's the promise you want to keep.
Yep. And I also think on top of that, though, you've got to think about how you leverage the promises that other people have given you. People, companies, services, whatever. People are saying that they can give you 15 nines and 17 nines and 100 nines, and so you put certain kinds of data in that storage, and that's going to cost you X amount of dollars, but there is a gradient there where you are paying more for more reliability. And that's the kind of thing that we're at, now, where you have to actually think about where does this fit within our business model? How much do we care about this data? Is it block kind of data that we could lose on our own that's not replicated? Is it object kind of data that we really need to maintain for a long amount of time? You've got Amazon reduced redundancy kind of stuff where you can pay less for data you care less about, and there's a transition or a gradient of data, I guess, the amount you care about data,
So
it was interesting that at reInvent, Amazon added a bunch of stuff that looked like it was meant to help people forklift their data into Amazon. Who was it who quipped that the snowball melts on delivery? It's like, you don't get it out, but they'll help you get it in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's their business.
Yeah, incidentally, even though you can send a 50 terabyte drive to them and upload that one.
They'll send it
one
to
at a time.
you, and then you can put it in. And
yeah, I was chatting with some folks even last night at the unconference here in Berlin for CF Summit, who were saying like that's just not enough. I have way more data than that to worry about. That's still partitioning data at too granular a level for some big applications.
okay. So yeah, should we talk about CF Summit?
Well, we just had Waters join us.
Oh, that's why I'm wondering if we should talk about CF Summit.
Are you a Berliner?
Oh, this is my favorite retweet of all time. Thank God I've seen him in person.
What, Waters is your favorite retweet?
Yeah, he's got a promoted tweet that just comes out on my timeline every 3 minutes, which I really appreciate. Thank you.
I don't know which tweet are we talking about.
It's all the money that Waters spends promoting tweets on.
Yeah, it's something about Cloud Foundry and Netflix OSS, and I feel really good about it every time I see it, but I've only seen it 44 times, so...
That's hilarious. I guess I use Tweetbot, so I never see those.
I mean, the nice thing is that Twitter's dying, and so it doesn't really matter anymore. Like, the whole platform is just, going away, so... I'm just trying to throw money in there to keep them alive so I can keep using it. That's pretty much all I'm trying to do.
I think we should all just send them $10 each, right? Just
I know, like honestly, people make fun of me for promoted tweets. I'm like, bro, I love Twitter so much. Anything you give them a dollar.
The way I think about
I
it,
send them like $10 a month. I mean, I really would.
If you retweet Waters' promoted tweets, that sends just a few more.
All right,
cents.
well there you go. Now I know that. It might be counterproductive, but for me, but if it keeps Twitter alive in the long tail of my career, that's a better thing.
I literally, like, I just do not want to change platforms to some new hipster thing that I don't know about yet. Like, I'm an old man on Twitter now.
Yeah.
welcome, James. By the way, thank you for all those tweets. By the way,
I appreciate the live trolling, sincerely.
So do you want to, Waters, you want to give us the TLDR on, hey, it's Berlin, it's morning, you're awake, and you want to talk about Cloud Foundry Summit?
Well, I mean, I think thanks for your help last night. We were working on the blog where we're going to talk about, we have a little bit of a bump in some of the features that we're shipping that comes out today that's pretty exciting. So that's kind of what's on my mind. I got to finish trying to edit that. It looks like you and Ian got that to a much better place than I'd left it in, jet lagged. So that's pretty cool.
Cloud Foundry folk, like, what's the impetus? Where are you guys running right now? Where is Cloud Foundry's Pivotal running from an infrastructure perspective?
The Pivotal Web Services runs on Amazon.
Runs on Amazon. Is there a plan or kind of a transition, if that, to some other platform, or is it going to be Amazon for a while until it becomes a problem?
Well, you should clarify the difference between, PCF and PWS, right?
Yeah, so Cloud Foundry itself runs on, it has an abstraction for infrastructure providers, so you can run that on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
The typical Go is OpenStack or VMware or AWS. Yeah.
Azure coming up here.
Right.
So the open source Cloud Foundry and the product have what we call CPIs.
Yep.
That if you map those to the infrastructure as service, then you can run the lifecycle management that Bosch gives you, and then you can use that to deploy the container scheduler that we have. So then all those customers that we collected so far, they're running basically, if you look on-prem, there's a lot of vSphere, some OpenStack, and then there's also representation of all the different public clouds, but the actual Pivotal web service that we run as a public service is on Amazon right now.
And is there any plan to transition that out? Do you guys have like hard dependencies from infrastructure?
No, I mean it's very disciplined in the sense that it's not using any of the underlying Amazon features.
Like RBS and all those kind of things are not part of the core infrastructure, right?
You could imagine connecting to those through what we call the service broker model, but the way that we're trying to build things, it's to kind of maintain that cloud portability story. Nice. But you can if you're a customer and you're running in Amazon and you want to use those underlying Amazon services, you can. But then you're realizing like now you're kind of locked into, which is not the worst thing ever, but if
it's
you
not
want
the worst cloud, yeah.
So then,
right.
I could imagine a future where you see there's other clouds that are part of that public offering, but that like the infrastructure that we need to build to make that kind of global collection of resources is sort of another level to the deployment that is just kind of on the roadmap and not a reality.
What would you guys say is that domain boundary? Would you say it's the instance, VM, whatever, or the load balancer, or where would you guys kind of draw the line as far as what's necessary for Cloud Foundry to really make it happen on the cloud?
Come on.
Yeah, I need all those pieces.
We'll go check this thing out. Hey, look, that dog.
John, you watching a video?
There's a bunch of dogs out here. Start the truck.
I think that the way
I'll take that as your answer, and that sounds just good enough.
Just start the truck. Let's do it.
I do want to bring up something interesting that I heard at Velocity EU in one of the keynotes from Anna Shipman. who is doing technical architecture stuff at the UK Government Digital Services. And they looked at building a platform. They decided to go with, somebody who would help them with the platform. They're evaluating a Cloud Foundry and something else. And she said in her keynote that they started out by thinking that multi-cloud was absolutely essential and that all of their users would definitely need that, and that was the first class, feature on their wish list. And then with starting to work with people on a proof of concept, they realized that their end users, their developers, had no interest in and did not care at all about multi-cloud. Like that wasn't even on the list of things they wanted.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a very normal thing to think that your users, if they are application developers, do not care about infrastructure.
So this kind of goes back to the earlier point about the networking. You're starting to echo, Victor, which is like a weird bug with. It's actually kind of a bug with Chrome or the browser that if you restart it, it will stop.
Let me mute.
If you restart the browser, it will probably work. There we go.
Okay.
While he's coming back, I think the question he just asked is kind of related to this notion we were talking about with the kind of both the networking and the storage, where like someone has to worry about all those components, but from the perspective of, the way that we're doing the deployments I'm most aware of, I'd say that you have a load balancer as kind of like a failure domain, and then obviously as many VMs as you can cram in there or you need in there for the capacity. Craig, are you there?
I am here, but I'm sitting in the reader and I cannot hear you.
Well, there you go. We got global.
Sorry,
global
guys.
Foundry.
Am I echoing back around?
No, it's better. It's like it's a software filter on the feedback that somehow gets off kilter and then starts echoing.
Gotcha.
So Victor, you were saying, app devs don't care about infrastructure. And
at the end of the day, I would, this whole DevOps thing, I love it. I love that everybody can work together, but in reality, what I see is that at the end of the day, there are devs and there are ops, and I would love this nice abstraction between them where there is a way for the devs to just do what they're good at and know what they know, and the ops guys to be able to manage that side of the house. And it sounds just super contrarian. It does. But what I've seen is that people know networks and people know Java code, for example.
It's not contrarian.
I don't think it's contrarian to the way I frame things.
So you talk about contracts and promises, right?
It's your promise.
You want resilience. You want your app to run, and that's what ops people want as well. They want to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, and I think that people have decided that it is some sort of magic thing that just happens between people where some guy can make bad code and this other guy is this unicorn magical guy who can just make it perfect. And that's just not.
It does not work that way. It does not work that way. What you choose to automate is just as important as the fact that you choose to automate.
Exactly.
And I would add that there's this bifurcation, or maybe a segmentation where there's different levels of expertise in development, and the infrastructure is just one other part of software development now. The software, a lot of tasks that were traditionally operational focused are now becoming software driven. There's all API driven stuff, so that's suspiciously like software development, and there's probably, if you look at the world we're living in right now from a Cloud Foundry perspective, you still have infrastructure. Especially if you're running this in a data center, someone has to be responsible for that. We have infrastructure automation at the level that there's an API to do provisioning on infrastructure as a service. Then we have a platform, and then we have applications that run on that platform. Each one of those layers has a different set of both development and operational responsibilities, and so you see that stratification in the work we're doing.
But also, at each one of those layers, where do you draw the line and say, this is my infrastructure? I think it's the platform down, right? So at that point, your infrastructure is an app all on its own.
Absolutely.
I agree. I think that you gotta put people in a situation that they are gonna succeed, that they're good at, right? And if not, if they are not good at that and you want them to be better at it, you better have someone who knows what better at it means, right? And there's some sort of gradient there, right? Where you have people that are good at this. You know, you don't start a company with 50 engineers. I'm sorry. It's just never going to happen. You start a company with a couple dudes, 3, 5, this other chick who's got this database experience. You know, you've got all of this stuff ready.
I mean, 50 engineers, Silicon Valley, like, you better have $15 million.
Exactly. Right? So you have this small group of people who are working on this thing that they have no idea about, to be honest. They have an idea about how to attack it, this idea about how to kind of form it into the thing that it could be in a couple years. But at that point, you have people that are working on a bunch of stuff that don't really know that thing.
In some ways, though, this is why Amazon was so transformative, because before you had Amazon Web Services, if you wanted to do that experiment, you had to go buy a bunch of Sunboxes, right?
Sure.
And so, like, your capital expense up front was a very different calculus.
Yeah, but I don't understand why the default position is actually the startup's problem. Like, I know that programmers make more noise than anyone else on the internet, but their problems aren't the most important. And so, like, I don't think that's the paradigm. And I think that's actually often where Cloud Foundry is misunderstood, is that it isn't intended for 3 little developers to grab off of GitHub and say, okay, let's start figuring out how to be slightly.
But I'm not. No, 3 developers, for me, 3 developers are developing on their laptops to get the first X version up and running. I don't, honestly, like, if I'm one of the first 3, I don't care where that thing's running because it's not a thing yet. So what does it matter if it's public or not?
The point that James is making. Go ahead, James.
I'm just pointing out that, like, as it, like the way I work is, kind of traipse around the world, is any building that any company that has enough money to have a building with its name on it is someone I want to talk to, actually. I think in reverse order, which is like, they're already at scale and they already have plenty of money that actually, for better or for worse, can subsidize bad behavior. Like, when you're a startup, you actually can't afford much bad behavior. So you're like, oh my god, I better use efficient tools. I better use cloud. I better go at this effectively. The opposite is when you're, say, a global bank that's worth $300 billion, and you sit with the CIO of that global bank and they do this to you. They're like, all right, I've got a bunch of people that all make $1 million a year trying to drive efficiency and I have no idea how to do it. Any advice, James? That's the world I live in. And what's fascinating
how do you change that culture of those guys that have just built themselves a pit of despair? You know, that's the 3. You have a $300 million company that has maybe 100,000 developers that are in a pit of despair. How do you build themselves out of that?
Well, and that's what Cloud Foundry helps people with, is it actually comes in with a set of opinions about how
I agree with that.
Scale operations on any infrastructure would start to look, as opposed to saying, hey, let's go build this from scratch as we write our first app, and then we'll wrap more and more automation around the snowball. I mean, just to share our perspective and what largely we're designed to do, and also why I find it so amazing. I get so excited about it because it doesn't just help. I mean, by the way, Uber's a tire fire in their tech stack too. Like, I got out of JFK at 3 a.m. and I was reminded of this. They were down for 25 minutes when I was trying to flag them in the rain at JFK for 2. Your buddy there, Andrew, and his Mexican dispatch. That is an Uber insider joke. Anyway, so that's a bit of where we come at it and how I've spent my last week. Like, how do you solve that problem?
Well, and the good news is that you have people at the top of those organizations who want to talk to you about solving it. So that's a lot better than if they just have sad developers who don't solve it. So I think it is realistic. I mean, it's unrealistic to assume that you can affect change in an organization like that just by a couple of rogue developers want to get some cloud happening and then everything is suddenly better. So that's probably not going to happen, right? I mean, in your experience, James?
No, I mean that's actually one thing I've realized is that it was insufficient for us just to come in and talk about their greenfield estate. We've started working on more of, hey, let's do an assessment of the apps you've written, see which ones could be, actually are readier than not to be cloud native if with minor refactoring. Like they actually don't use a lot of dirty, heavyweight old school Java things. Like this is just the servlet implementation largely. We could put this, kind of on our platform. So, and the reason that's important is you kind of have to drain the swamp of the old behavior. Like a startup doesn't have one team that's like, let's go fast, and one team that's like, screw you, bureaucracy rocks. And
well, you eliminate the silo part, right?
Yeah.
Your job, James, is in essence to say, screw the silos. You've got guys that provide business value.
Correct.
Turn them up, and those other guys can do this other thing, which is your Cloud Foundry platform.
Right. No, and there was a fascinating, the psychology actually is what's become fascinating to me. Home Depot presented in Colorado about what happens once they had a turnkey Cloud Foundry platform. And I believe they have one running on Amazon, and they have one in the private data center. So again, the cloud doesn't really matter anymore in that sense at certain scales. And they said, okay, we have this push-button platform we could deploy in 15 seconds. Why do our deploys take us 7 hours? And they're like, actually, because we buffered our new shiny new instant access platform with a bunch of rules, and we're trying to understand why we still crave those rules so much.
Right. At the unconference for CF Summit, we had a talk about migrating apps into cloud native, and one of the interesting parts of it was trying to define what legacy means, like what even needs to be migrated.
Why do you guys, at the end of the day, see people going with a private-public kind of thing? What is the reasoning for that private side of it? This has been my job for the last 5 years. Like, why people want private for certain reasons. For us, it's been data.
I mean, for a lot of these places, they've already got extensive investments in data centers.
Yep.
Those aren't just
using legacy hardware.
What's that?
Using legacy hardware was the main driver for having a private.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's a huge investment to put a bunch of data centers together, right? You got it.
But what if they already had them? That have had data centers in the past, right? And so you're saying that there are public side, private side. Why does that private side exist?
I think honestly, Victor, that's less our fight. Like in a sense, we don't care.
Yeah.
Because to us, it's just dumb infrastructure APIs. Like if we go to Amazon, we're actually just give us your infrastructure. If we go to vSphere, give us infrastructure. The only thing that sometimes throws wrench is that there's a lot of diversity in OpenStack implementation, so that can be a rocky road.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
And
then all of a sudden, Azure's hot.
As an ex-eucalyptus guy, I understand that problem quite a bit.
Oh, you did eucalyptus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here in Berlin, Carolyn McCrory just joined us, and she made a hilarious face when you mentioned diverse OpenStack deployment. You wanna weigh in on that, Carolyn?
One word: complicated. Just one word.
Yep. So a lot of companies are running private for a plethora of reasons, but they are because they feel they need to, and that's something that we should support because we can. As James said, it's just a handful of APIs that your infrastructure automation can support, and then you're good to go.
We're in an interesting position in this sense because the way that we start this conversation, we're not dealing with the ARP cache and the rest of it. We start with the assumption that you have an infrastructure as a service API that we can use to provision infrastructure. Yep. And if you have that, then Bosch works, and if you don't, then you're not ready to talk to us. But what we see in some of these cases is that you put Bosch on these infrastructures, and Bosch will show you pretty fast that stuff's unstable.
Right. It's not good. Yeah.
So we've got a number of large-scale deployments on these clouds where they come back and say, yeah, Bosch is great. We found out we're unstable.
Yeah. Most of the time when someone comes at me about how hard it was for them to install, especially open source Cloud Foundry, they also have a story about how it exploded in their OpenStack implementations, which we already discussed. It's like, yeah, that's problematic.
So, Carolyn, I'm wondering if you want to give us a little bit of your ideas about what CloudSoft is going to be talking about at Cloud Foundry Summit here.
One of the big things that we've been doing is allowing customers to bridge their, let's say, legacy Oracle database systems to all the new applications that are being built in CF. So we published a blog about being able to do database access and set users to be able to access all the backend data stores that, say, like an Oracle system would have, which is a big thing in the financial services groups. A lot of those customers are building their net new applications on CF, but there's no way for them to actually try to bridge the two worlds. And so they're trying to look for ways to do that. We've managed to do that with the open source booklet that we've had. So that's one of the big things that we're going to talk about.
And in Apache Brooklyn, you open sourced that, right?
Yep, we did. We were supposed to have graduated, but there were some minor hiccups. The code's there. It's just a procedural thing now to actually get it fully to graduation. So we're hoping in the next couple of weeks we'll actually see that out.
Excellent.
Nice. And that actually, we're echoing again.
Victor started echoing again because computers. Blame the computers.
Is it Victor? Is it me? I don't know.
No, it's Victor.
Computer's not a solved problem.
You can tell by who has the green dots.
Yeah. Right on. Oh yeah. So one of the things is, why would you even try and do this? The legacy conversation we had at the unconference, I think we drew the line at any application that you can't deploy as fast as you need to needs to be fixed. Is legacy.
Or any application that's not in Cloud Foundry.
Yeah, for the purposes of that conversation. Yeah.
I invert it when I talk to people. If they have a legacy system that they don't need to really change or scale and it's working, just leave it alone. Like invest in building your future. Don't spend time decomposing something that's working.
And then Carolyn makes the excellent point too that if people have super important data that might be relevant to their, say, money making, they don't necessarily want to move all of that right the first second that they start building new apps.
It's probably not even possible.
Right.
Yep.
Really established companies in existing established companies in existing sectors like insurance, for example, they can't mess with that too much. They have a 30-year-old data storage system, and there's no stomach, there's no fortitude for messing with that.
Not only that, it's their lifeblood. If there was a change that gave them a 3% decrease in whatever, they're done, And so I agree with that. You leave things, let a sleeping dog lie, I think is the term.
Or to Schaefer's point, you don't have to sit there and rebuild your past. You can build your future while still being able to connect to your past.
So I think, what do you think is the right time? So you're in that steady state now. You're a bank or whatever. When do you start to change things? What is the trigger for you to decide that you need a different paradigm, or decide that you need to change the way your infrastructure runs, or whatever, implementation detail that optimizes your business? When do you decide that's the right thing?
Conversation with James.
I think it's always going to be context specific. Yeah, James has a strange effect on banks. But the thing I would say there is, and this is we'll get a little philosophical, but the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
And the second best time is right now, right? So wherever you're at, you have to be there, but it's an opportunity every second to build your future, and you just got to figure out, what investments you're willing to make and what curve you want to be on. If you're protecting, literally billions of dollars in your legacy system, you're probably not going to do all of it at once. But you can see the writing on the wall in a lot of these industries where they're vulnerable to software disruption, and they don't want to be disrupted. They want to be the disruptor.
Right. It's fear-driven development. Right. I mean, when you can go to wealthfront.com/engineering and they say we pushed 1 hour ago and we managed $2 billion in assets, if you're not trying to get somewhere near there, then you're already behind.
Well, the big issue a lot of the financials are also facing is the whole thing with speed, right? They know that we're dealing with what we call the Tinder generation, where they make decisions in the first 2 seconds and before they swipe left or right. And so their customers are starting to get that way as well. So they're having to figure out, how do I retain market share and have new systems at the same time? Okay, I need a new platform to build these new systems, but then how do I keep it fresh? And at the same time, they're also having a workforce that's aging out. So
and I'll guarantee you, just to go full circle, the type of developer that's going to sit and make you that experience that's going to keep a compelling like financial thing going does not need to know about the ARP cache and the network, right? Like that's not the same person.
That's right.
Yeah.
Guys, can we stop? Can we just like let go of the ARP cache thing?
Yeah.
Sorry. Stop talking about that. But I decided 2 weeks ago that I'm done with that term, so.
I'm into spanning tree algorithms. I was really getting.
Oh no, James, no! Sorry, I can't talk about layer 2 networking at all on this podcast. I'm gonna put a kibosh on that.
We're over our ARP cache quota.
Yeah.
What I think is very interesting is that we think about you were just talking about banking being this Tinder or this swipe left, swipe right, 2-second decision kind of methodology, but that's the whole world right now. Like that is the entire. That's just the fact that you relate it to banking to me was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then I took it one step back and I was like, that's the entirety of the world right now, is that we are thinking in that level of decision making. Like 1 to 2 seconds is where we decide whether something is good or bad. Netflix, flick, 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 flick. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. Go down. Do something else. And I think that's the world that we're living. That kind of data-driven, kind of this quick decision world is it's not a computer thing. It's where our heads are.
Hey,
which is crazy.
Let's all welcome Victor to 2015.
Victor discovers the universe.
Yeah.
I just got here, guys.
Did you get a smartphone yet?
Well, no. I hope you guys saw the whole Back to the Future thing. I was part of that, so I just came in the DeLorean to 2015, October 22nd, I think it was.
Welcome. We're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, but it's not banking, right? It's everything that we've ever done.
Some might even say software is eating the world.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some might not. I'm just kidding.
Well, but to go back to, app devs don't care about infrastructure, but they care about resilience. I mean, you cannot afford to have inoperable infrastructure that can't let you move that fast. Like, you just have to be able to move that fast, and you have to have some pretty wicked automation under your app.
And
how do you know how much money I have, Casey?
I don't think of automation as an I don't know. People say like we have automation. I think of automation as pipelining, right? There's no real way to think about automation outside of the way that the pipelines of your developers / people work through to the fact that your customers get value, right? And I think of that as pipeline. So I think, what is the best way for me to pipeline the work in a way that there are kind of certain checks and balances? And
I think we were saying the same thing, but I like the lean word for queue. Like there's a bunch of queues.
Yep.
And you're trying to put business value through queues.
And you find where is your work in progress, right? Where are there a bunch of things that are going on in the middle of this process that
theory of constraints. Let's find what's holding us back.
Totally.
Relentlessly remove.
Hey guys, I have a question. Sorry, it's not really operable. An ops question. One of the things on pipelines is we brought some partners. One of the things we're announcing today, not announcing, but like we're going to talk about it publicly today, is that we're bringing GitLab, Artifactory, and then Jenkins Cloud Bees are all native parts, so like deployable from the Bosch platform. And through this whole journey, I've learned more about GitLab, and it's I have something stuck in my head, and I need people's help on it. GitLab is open source, therefore if I need a feature on it, I can send a pull request.
Yep.
Why, if I need a feature on GitHub, can't I send a pull request?
Close.
Like that? that I'm like, the only people in the world that don't take pull requests are GitHub. And then that blew my mind up. Like I just got caught in this weird vortex black hole of
Right.
referential thinking, and I don't understand why you can't send a pull request to GitHub. Can someone help me out of this hole? Throw me a ladder.
No
Yeah.
tears. No tears, James. Only dreams now.
Ah.
You can send pull requests to various bits of GitHub, right? Because they've open sourced a bunch of the components, but you can't pull down GitHub and run it on your laptop or on your own, private thing. But GitLab you can. Yeah, I don't know why.
I mean, honestly, from what I understand, some of that has to do with the weight of history in GitHub's architectural decisions. Like some of it is not as easy for them to decouple from their business logic.
Yeah, it
Honestly,
just kind of blew my mind when I thought about it. I'm like, I like this idea that we can send pull requests to GitLab because we're trying to get pipelines. So like when we set customers up, so I was talking to one of my friends in a big company, and I'm like, hey, we're going to have this GitLab tile for you, and if you need any features in your pipelines, you need anything else from us, just let me know. I'll have our developers send pull requests to better integrate it all. And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of useful.
You can do that with GitHub's open APIs and
Sure.
stuff like that. That wouldn't be out of the purview. I think GitLab has been open source since the beginning and has tried to fight GitHub in that way. Unfortunately, GitHub has the masses today, and what they provide is APIs, and that's what you have to build off of.
Yeah.
No, I think the way that
what I haven't heard a good answer for is why they haven't open sourced their Rails app. It's
That's what I'm saying. Like what? Like what's so hard
generic
about that?
Rails app. There is nothing special about their Rails app, I don't believe. If there was, then I would be super happy to see it. I don't think that's there. So that's the part that gets me, is that it's a proper Rails app that doesn't really have crazy value outside of itself.
Yeah, and GitLab is just a Rails app that is open sourced.
Exactly.
And
Right.
therefore, you can modify it. And I don't know. It's not the end of the world, and I know GitHub's taken a lot of money under their existing model, so it's very hard for them to change. But I was trying to think over the next 20 years what could win as a diverse deployed everywhere. And one of the problems is that GitHub right now only ships as a single node. Like when you try to buy GitHub Enterprise, remember you're consulting to Sony, Andrew? And what was your experience like when you tried to get anything?
Honestly, though, James, I don't think that Git and Git repositories are a business driver.
Well, but controlling your delivery pipeline, having access
they're part of the pipeline, though, right?
Yeah,
part of the pipeline. But I mean, how hard is it for you to get a GitHub hook or a Git hook, whatever, right?
It's not that hard, thankfully, to GitHub and GitLab. But I would say I would frame it like slightly different, and some of this has to do with the investments. But GitLab doesn't run this massive public service, and they're kind of laser focused on trying to sell.
They do run a public service, though.
But not to the extent of GitHub.
This free, like I can do all this stuff on GitHub again.
Yeah.
They run something. It's not massive, though. Andrew's right. It's not the massive, all-consuming. Everyone thinks it's synonymous with Git.
I mean, if you go there, the first thing it tells you to do is download.
Yeah.
No, GitLab runs a public service.
Yeah, they have one hosted edition, but it's like
Nobody's asserting that they don't run anything. We're saying that they're not GitHub in terms of their public face.
Yeah, no, they're not the most popular Git repository in the world, generally. Like, obviously not. But they do have public repositories that you can sign up for and not host your own. All that stuff. They've tried to follow the GitHub model. They're just not as popular.
I don't think they're going to win the hosted war. I guess where I'm saying is what's interesting to me is Andrew, share your story from the old days of trying to land a feature in the hosted edition or the on-prem edition.
I felt like, and I still have a lot of friends over there, and more friends have left at this point, but like they're not very responsive from a customer service perspective, and that
the business
means
side, that doesn't work.
it just. I thought that it was a little interesting to me because I was working with a third party that was paying them, and I was friends with a lot of people there, and I was trying to do something that I was actually willing to do, like all the work to make it work. And I just couldn't get any conversation with the person that would make that happen. So that was frustrating. That was a while ago, and I think my experience predates them really trying to do anything with the enterprise anyway. Like I think that they've come around a bit more since then.
Fair enough, yeah.
But this was early.
A lot of companies have that story with anybody, where they think they're too good or too big.
Well, in some ways, it goes back to the framing that James started with, where I think that if you're, in a particular strip of California, then you tend to be sort of slanted towards the startups, and you might not think outside of whatever that kind of echo chamber is with respect to who your customers and your opportunities are. Where when you look at the actual numbers of where some of this opportunity, especially when you start talking about IT spend, it's not the startups in Silicon Valley that are the big opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is the customers who end up being, I think, really interested in Cloud Foundry, end up being the ones who have big problems.
I think it's a huge opportunity to help people, and we've been joking around, with Cloud Native, and we have a bunch of Cloud Native framing in our language now, but I really think that there's this opportunity to be, and it goes back to Victor's question about, when do you make that decision? I think a lot of people made the decision, they just don't know what to do next. So we're trying to act like the Cloud Native naturalization and immigration services to help them go through that transition.
Cloud INS. So, what do you guys think is the right time to move into X or Y public cloud and or the hosted, Cloud Foundry service? Like, where do you go?
I think
if you're a startup, in the right strip of California, as you said,
you're framing the question like there's a right answer, right?
No. I
think it's more about context, right? Like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Okay,
on what time frame?
I have 2 technical folks, 3 business folks who are trying to launch a service more or less like Airbnb.
Just use our hosted edition. That's not even a question.
PWS.
Yeah. That's not a question. That's not a hard question.
So I heard AWS and hosted edition at the same time.
No, PWS. That's our host edition. It's
PWS.
Pivotal Web Services.
Pivotal Web. Okay.
Yeah, what I would say, Victor, is I'm just building an app. I don't really care. Just get it online and make it work.
No, but you're just the dev. You're not the guy who's deciding where the budget comes from. So,
but that's the
question. I mean, if you have some
people to this, right? Or
if you have a real budget, then work with us and we'll teach you how to pair, and we'll help you build your app. Like, that's what we do.
Yeah, but you don't have any traffic or any issues at first, so just go to PWS, our hosted edition.
Okay, I'm in PWS. I'm stoked. I'm like, all right, this is perfect for my business. When would I ever get off of PWS?
When you have massive global reach and customers.
When you run the numbers and you realize that it's costing you more than if you went to AWS
when you do the algebra and it's like, I should build a data center.
Maybe never.
I don't know, Andrew. I don't know if I would ever get there, but
maybe
so
never.
What does that algebra look like? Is it you guys are charging me on top of AWS instances or volumes or block storage or object storage? Like where do I know when it makes sense to go from one side to the other if you guys are really just running on AWS?
Well, see, we're running on AWS, but if you decide to build a platform yourself on AWS, you reach in and you find that it is, as somebody was saying, as Andrew was saying, it's a bag of very sharp objects. So you certainly can build something on top of it. Many people do. You may find that that's not the best use of your engineering and operations talent. Yeah. And you might want them scaling your application to add more business value, for example.
I mean, this is all nascent, right? And there's a bunch of equations that are happening. So the price of the public cloud is simultaneously going down, right? So there's a bunch of transition points that you could look at. Okay, maybe I don't want to be on this multi-tenant service that Pivotal runs, and I want to have my own dedicated Cloud Foundry instance that I have more control over the capacity and the cost or whatever. That's an option. There's there's a lot of equations that I would look at your context and like we could walk through and make that thing, but just as a blanket statement, I mean, it just sort of depends on what your traffic looks like, what your costs are, and there's a bunch of things that we could consider, but I don't think it's that hard to make if you have your full context.
So one question that like I always think about is, we always talk about people starting on a platform, and by the time, when they have enough things to worry about, they go and build their own platform. But by the time, isn't it like too late for them to build a platform?
I'm not talking about someone building their own platform. I'm talking about doing Cloud Foundry in different scenarios.
Yeah, redeploying Cloud Foundry with Bosch somewhere else that they want to manage, kind of a thing.
But then what do you do about the data that is already there in the managed service? Like people who were on Amazon like 5-6 years back, like they can't even move out of Amazon now because all their data is in S3.
It depends on the mass of data and what's the S3 equivalent of wherever you're going to go. I mean, that's as big a problem as the size of data. Like, what else is there?
You can move your data from S3 to Google Cloud Platform. The amount of time that's going to take and the amount of time it's going to take for you to move your other part of your platform, I think, is the more interesting part. But actually moving the data is something you have to realize has to happen and does not take non-zero time. Right. I think the part that people appreciate is like, oh, like I could just move from one cloud to the other. It's like, no, that's not free.
Yeah, it's not easy, and it's going to be difficult, and it's going to take like a lot of effort at the application end to make sure that you're writing in two places, you're reading from two places, like that.
Oh, I wouldn't do it in two places. I would replicate for a while, and then I would switch over.
Yeah, we can
architecture design.
Yeah.
That's architecture design now. You get into.
Yeah,
have you seen like people like moving from hosted Pivotal to like their own Pivotal at some stage? Like, have you seen that with people?
There's a few projects, and especially the way that we work with labs as a project, there'll be work that gets done, in one environment and moves to another. And part of it is a lot of the stuff that we're talking about in the early phase of a project, those data gravity problems aren't so massive. So it's not that bad to like move these apps across. As you get to the point where it's a massive web service, like I haven't seen a ton of those, but for the most part, this is the early days for this business, and you're just barely migrating them from their legacy into the platform, let alone trying to go between a bunch of different options.
I see.
James just posted a link to one of our.
I'll give you an example of something that was pretty sizable. CNN launched a new project called The Great Big Story, which is a pretty simple app, right? It's just it's a JavaScript front end. It's not demanding back end, but it had 20 million users instantly, and we just threw that into Pivotal Web Services, and it ran, and we never even knew the difference. So there's a pretty significant scale you got to get to before you exceed what kind of our hosted platform does.
Yeah, I think what he was asking about was like the actual date, like the amount of data, right? You're talking about 7 to 20 stories per day or something like that with the CNN stuff versus like the 50 billion gigabytes or stories or whatever.
This goes back to the point I was trying to make about context, right? If you're just a stream of news, then your migration path is very different than if you've got petabytes of data stuck in someplace.
And I think that's where we've never cast ourselves as having an answer to that. But think of it this way, we talked to a soda manufacturer, and the way that those places work is that every country is its own distributor. And they're like, okay, now how do we roll out our software to all of our distributors around the world? We'd like to have one interface to do that. With something like Cloud Foundry, they could just have that as the same app distributed everywhere. So it might be less that you're migrating your legacy and more like, oh, and now I want to add Algeria. Okay, that's exactly the same. Or I want to add a node in Japan. It's exactly the same.
I could see that, though, similarly with just like a Git repository, right? Like global distribution of software, I think, is a Git repository today.
I think you're totally wrong. I think that is insanity. Because
the distribution is one thing, but the operation is another.
Yeah, because
fair enough. But he was talking about how do we push software out somewhere to a new country? Yeah. You give them access to a new Git repository, and then you give them access to a new way to deploy that software. Right.
That's the point. What I guess I'm saying is that where people get stuck is that their operational characteristics are not portable. Their code is,
Right.
Yeah.
but the operational characteristics aren't. So that's what we really try to embody, all of that in an opinionated way.
Fair.
All right, we're 75 minutes in.
I can't believe I'm semi-human when my body has no idea what time it actually is.
It's now dark 30, quarter after in your home
I
time
just
zone.
realized that it's actually midnight where I'm from, but I'm pretending it's the morning.
Well,
Yeah.
the sun has a funny way of tricking your body.
Good enough for us. Thank you, James.
Yeah, good to meet you.
So does
Sorry.
anyone have any secrets or last words, and then we'll call it a night?
Guys, this is my first Cloud Native After Dark, and I really appreciated all of your guys' time.
No,
You guys
you're
are all
awesome.
spectacular, and thank you guys.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, throw me a tweet so I know who you are on Twitter too.
Perfect. Will do.
I would say,
Thanks, everyone.
if we want secrets, we've got PCF 1.6, all sorts of awesome stuff coming. It's going to be press releasey stuff later today.
It won't be that secret by morning.
No.
I'll check my feed.
Yeah, if anybody's listening in and in Berlin for CF Summit, come say hi. Three of us are all there.
We're going to head over there now.
And James will be there too, yeah. Cheers.
All right.
Enjoy,
Until
folks.
next time, Cloud Native After Dark.